Hello and welcome to the official Priest of Menzies guide. This guide's going to be 90% comprehensive, so it's a lot of information. Once again, I'm going to assume that you know the builds, the armor, the weapons, and the consumables, and how to read your skills. Okay, for some background information, the Priest of Menzies will spawn whenever you take the Army of Darkness quest from Cromwell the Eternal at the camp objective. This is where Menzies is in relation to the camp objective, but most of the time you're going to be approaching from Forge. Okay, so as you approach Menzies, the first thing that you're going to want to locate is this patrol. This is the Menzies patrol, and it comes in two variations. It will always have 3 warriors and 2 monks. The caster could either be an Ice Hand, which is an elementalist, or an Ether Breaker, which is a mesmer. The safer and slower variant is the elementalist, where the faster and more preferred variant is the mesmer. The goal with this patrol is to assassinate the caster of the group and to leave as many berserkers alive as you can. We want to keep these berserkers alive in order to fuel our damage through Voss and sand shards to assassinate Menzies. I'll show you some examples and describe how to do each of these, but first I'd like to talk about some threats with Menzies. To the left of Menzies Cliff, there's a small group of skeletons. You also want to stay away from their general area, as there's impalers underneath the ground that can chain aggro them. To the right of Menzies Cliff, there's also a group of 5 skeleton casters. Avoid aggroing these. For Menzies' group in particular, there's 2 Shadow Rangers and a Shadow Monk accompanying him. Generally speaking, unless something goes wrong, we don't care where any of these enemies are except for the priest himself. And the last thing for threats. There are some impalers up on the cliff where Menzies is, and if you aggro or pop these impalers, the Dragon Lich and the Ether Breaker will run at you. To avoid aggroing the Dragon Lich, keep your aggro bubble beyond the cliff's edge while you're pulling Menzies. One final thing before we move on to the gameplay examples. The Menzies patrol will run counterclockwise on this triangular path. So if you approach Menzies and you don't see the patrol or something doesn't look right, if you wait long enough, it will come to a normal spot. Now onto the gameplay examples where I'll explain every scenario that you'll be in. Okay, as we approach, I spot the Menzies patrol and I see that it's an Ether Breaker. I'll start to precast from a good distance away. I recommend you cast Sand Shards, Vow of Strength, Mystic Regeneration, Mirage Cloak, and then Staggering Force in that order. And we're not going to be casting Honor once we jump onto this group. I target the caster, which is the Ether Breaker in this case, and then I Death Charge onto him. Now the way that you spike Ether Breakers is a timing game. You need to pay attention to which skills they cast. First, always lead with an auto attack, and always try to make sure that the auto attack is hitting another enemy other than the caster, whether it be a bond or a berserker. After that first attack, the berserker should be in melee range. Now, your next move depends on whether or not you got shattered. If you did get shattered, recast Staggering Force and then use Eremites, and if he did not shatter yet, you can immediately Eremites and then cast Staggering Force. This takes some practice, but I promise you it's not as hard as it sounds. Oftentimes he dies after Eremites, and if he doesn't die, it's usually 1 or 2 more auto attacks. For this next part, make sure that you upkeep Mirage Cloak and Mystic Regeneration. We're going to aggro Menzies and then do something I call the Menzies dance. First, target Menzies and then run into his aggro range. Once he begins attacking you, move outside of his attack range. But do not move too far outside of his attack range. You want to keep him in a space that is barely outside of it. By doing this, he's going to path down to attempt to get into auto attack range. So you're going to mirror his movement while keeping him at this precise distance. Now if you remember earlier, I mentioned how there's impalers on the ground where Menzies Cliff is. You can easily avoid this if you just imagine there's an invisible wall where I draw it here. Once he comes down the ramp and starts attacking you, it's as simple as pulling him, casting your enchantments, jumping on top of him, casting Honor, and then letting the berserkers come into range before you spike. Once he dies, he'll drop the Unholy Text, which is the quest item that you need to take back to camp. Oftentimes it'll be your job to kill the Shard Wolf that's on the battlefield. This is just a matter of getting used to where the patrols move and then pulling the wolf there and then spiking him. Okay, for the Ice Hand, you're going to approach it the same. You're going to select the Ice Hand, and your cast order is slightly different. You don't need to cast Mystic Regeneration or Staggering Force. If you jump him as he starts to cast Deep Freeze, you can simply give him an auto attack and then wait for the warriors to walk in before you use Eremites. And again, he usually dies, but if he doesn't, just give him another auto attack. I'm going to immediately approach Menzies to begin the Menzies dance, but I notice this 5-caster group on the right is extremely close. So in order to pause the Menzies dance, I'm going to walk into attack range of the priest. This allows me to wait while the 5 skeletal casters move away, without having to restart the Menzies dance. Once the casters move out of the way, it's the exact same thing as before. Sometimes whenever you have an Ice Hand and your patrol is shaped slightly weird, the Ice Hand will not immediately cast Deep Freeze on you, and whenever you Death Charge in, he will run up and blind you. In this case, just auto attack him until he's about half HP, and then use Eremites once all the Berserkers are in. If you want to get advanced, you can use a Blind Shield in combination with the Clarity Rune to make his blind last only 3 seconds. This can make the spike more consistent. Okay, that pretty much wraps up the Menzies guide. I think 90% of the difficulty when learning Menzies is dealing with and managing the patrol. So that's what I primarily focused on in this guide. If you have any questions, as always, you can PM me in game or leave a comment. Thanks for watching.